This is VSiN's, the sports betting network.
This is VSiN's College Football Betting Guide Release Special. Here's Ben Wilson and Adam Burke.
Welcome in, everybody, and welcome to the month of August. Welcome to the latest VSiN Betting Guide being released. It is the VSiN College Football Betting Guide release show with Adam Burke, who has not really slept at all since we basically did our NFL Betting Guide release show. I'm Ben Wilson. Glad to get the band back together, though, Adam, and without a doubt, as great of an accomplishment as the NFL Guide is every year, it's another animal when we talk college football, no doubt on that.
Yes, sir. Yes, it is. 212 pages in this year's College Football Betting Guide. Team previews of all 134 teams, not to mention several different feature articles, some of which we will talk about here during this guide release special show. We got a couple of our writers on this show as well. I've slept, albeit very little.
That's okay. That's better than I would have thought, based on how daunting a task it is. If you wanted to know everything about the teams power rated at the top, like Georgia, we've obviously got the full breakdown. If you want to know everything about Kennesaw State, newest member to the FBS, we've got you covered there as well. We'll have a couple of the contributors from our betting guide to join us later on in this release show. We'll have Jonathan Von Tobel. JVT was tasked with breaking down the Big 12, the Mountain West, and the what is remaining of the Pac-12, now the Pac-2, with Oregon State and Washington State. He'll join us coming up in a little bit. We'll also check in with Zach Cohen, who did the full deep dive breakdown on the SEC, as well as a really good analysis into the Heisman market. We'll start, though, Adam, by giving everybody an idea of what you can expect. 212 pages. That's a lot. And it's not just simply breakdowns of every single team. We've got a lot going on there. Really starting, too, with Matt Humans, his preseason top 25. Helps people get kind of a general gauge for what to expect, at least from the expectations, right, to start the year, because there are so many moving parts now that we're in that transfer portal, heavy recruiting era of college football that is really year-round. And it's at least a good starting point, I'd say, for a lot of bettors to be aware of.
Yeah, I mean, college football free agency is kind of how we refer to it in the guide. I mean, you get the transfer portal, you have NIL, you have money being thrown all over the place. You've got a lot of Group of Five teams losing some of their best players to what is now the Power Four. Used to be the Power Five, as you mentioned, the Pac-12, kind of stripped for pieces and parts, moved around the country from a realignment standpoint. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to try to catch up on. And, I think the number of pages in this guide, right, 212, it sounds very daunting, right? It sounds like a daunting read. It's not. The team previews are about 450 words apiece, so you can get through those pretty quickly. You can focus on the conferences and the teams that you really want to focus on. But look, it is one of those things, Ben, where if a quarterback gets moved in the NFL, we all know about it, right? We all see the headlines on ESPN, all the national media outlets, stuff like that. It's not always the case in college football. So there's a lot to catch up on, a lot to get to of the player movement. There are 30 new head coaches in college football this year, Ben. There are 32 NFL teams. There are 30 new head coaches in college football. So there's a lot of stuff that you have to catch up on from the offseason, and we were able to deep dive into all of it. And the other thing that I think is a really big positive about our guide relative to some of the other guides that are out there, we don't have to worry about communicating with athletic departments and SIDs. Yep. We don't have to worry about calling coaches and hoping they answer our phone calls. We can be unbiased. We can give you honest assessments of these teams from a betting focus to help get you ready for the upcoming season. And I think that's something that's a really, really powerful part of our guide and something that you won't find in other places.
The other thing I was thinking that's really proprietary to what we do here at VSiN for the guide, Adam, it is in these new eras now of college football. It's not just the transfer portal, but it's the playoff, which has been expanded. New schedule this year, now that you're expanded up to 12 teams. From the betting angle, and you don't see this in many guides who are just doing the traditional team-by-team conference breakdowns, really hard to kind of know, okay, where is the value? How are these new conferences now that it is basically the Power Four? So many new teams into the Big 12, into the Big 10, the SEC. How is that going to manifest and look? And I think that's a really big part of what we try to do, too, from the general overarching thought before getting into the team previews. It's, hey, how do you tackle these conference futures now that it is so wildly different? How do you attack college football playoff, the betting markets? It is worth the deep dive. And to build up your portfolio before the season, when you talk about expanding markets, Adam, there's opportunity there to have really, really good diverse portfolios and allow yourself room to make good amount of profits.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think people realize, Oklahoma and Texas are in the SEC. I mean, that's been talked about for years now. There are 4 teams from the Pac-12 that joined the Big 10 as well: UCLA, USC, Washington, and Oregon. But There are other conferences that people aren't really thinking about. A lot of the Pac-12 teams that went to the Big 12, people just think, oh, well, the Big 12 lost Oklahoma and Texas, they're going to take a step back. No, not necessarily, because you've got a Utah, you have an Arizona, you have Colorado and Arizona State in the Big 12 now. And also, the ACC, SMU, Cal, and Stanford, now members of the Atlantic Coast Conference, which is crazy to think about. But those are things that have an impact, on conference markets, on win total markets. Cal has the worst travel schedule in the country by far, and a worse travel schedule than several NFL teams, nearly all of the NFL teams. So these are things that we highlight in this guide, and I like that you brought up the conference futures specifically, because with every conference except for the Sun Belt, divisions are gone. So the Sun Belt is still keeping the East and West format, at least for this year. We'll see if that changes going forward. But all of the other conferences no longer have divisions. So that means the top 2 teams are going to play in the conference championship game, not the division winners. And that's something that definitely has an impact on how you're going to handicap that conference. You think about the Big Ten in the past, like Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State were the 3 best teams in the conference. But one of Iowa or Wisconsin or somebody like that would get into the title game by virtue of winning the West Division. That's no longer the case in the Big Ten and in a lot of these conferences around the country.
Where our handicapping in a lot of senses, say you're looking at the Big Ten, was, all right, that Big Ten West, not very good. And the handicap would basically become who has the path to at least get in the title game. That way you could hedge off. Now in many of these cases, like you're talking about, Adam, sans the Sun Belt, that is now no longer the case. And it is a big reason why, when you get rid of that element of the handicap, power ratings are a huge part of any bettor's arsenal when it comes to all sports, especially football. That was a big focus for you, Adam, even though you're focusing on the American, the AAC. You've also got the Sun Belt full breakdowns for us. But I thought a really engaging and really well worth the deep dive article is talking about power ratings, how you're building a model, and how it ended up basing your opinions on the start of the year here as it relates to your top 10 starting out.
Yeah, and I think among the many things that we have in this guide that I think are really valuable, we have Steve Makinen's power ratings, right? They're on every team page. There's a list of them at the top of the team pages. But those are just Steve's numbers. And while they are proprietary to us, and they are something that is, again, a tremendously valuable asset in our college football guide, in our weekly college football content over at VSiN.com, I also have always taken it upon myself, and this is not to pat myself on the back. I'd tear my rotator cuff if I tried to do that. But I've always tried to take it upon myself to help empower people to do a lot of this stuff on their own. So the last couple of years in the guide, including this year, I put together an intro into a very basic power ratings model. I call them positional power ratings, where you just kind of grade the position groups on a scale basically of 5 to 15 or 4 to 10. The position groups are weighted heavier that I find more important. Quarterbacks, offensive and defensive line, and then coaching and special teams. Those are on a scale of up to 15 points. Running back, wide receiver, linebacker, and defensive back up to 10 points. And basically, it's just a matter of looking at a team's talent, maybe looking at returning production, looking at how they fit with the respective coordinator on that side of the ball, and coming up with some values for these teams to kind of rank them 1 through 134, not only to give yourself an idea going into this season, but also to be able to create your own lines for the upcoming games as we go throughout the season. So that's just kind of a how-to thing that I put in the guide that I think, people, if they have the time to do it, or if they at least, read through the article and have an understanding of where I'm coming from, I think it can be a really powerful tool for you.
There's a lot of people that look, say, at the NFL market and go, well, this is razor sharp. There's no point like in me doing my own numbers because the market kind of tells you where the number ought to be. I mean, college football, you're getting weeks with 7, 8, 9-point moves, side and total, which is where everything you laid out, Adam, super valuable to get into. And a part of creating, what you believe the line ought to be in a game, your own line versus what the books are, it is evaluating home field advantage, which again, we're comparing to the NFL. It's pretty standard where really we know now it's really 1.5 to 2 points across the board in the NFL. That ain't the case in college football, Adam. That was another big part of the guide here that I think people will really get a lot of value from as you broke down just the different tiers, how you're grading these teams, and what really matters as far as home field advantage.
Right, and I will say this. I mean, I'm not creating something I don't think is super groundbreaking, and in fact, the title of the home field advantage is something is better than nothing, and I think that that's true because, home field advantage is not a blanket thing across college football. It's just not. You're not going to have the same home field advantage for Akron or UMass or Temple that you're going to have for LSU or Alabama, or, you factor in some of the travel situations this year as well. You got teams in the Big 12 going to Colorado that never play in elevation, stuff like that. So you can't just paint it with a broad brush. So what I tried to do was I put teams into buckets based on their home performances over the last 3 years, ranging from 3.5 points of home field advantage to 1 point of home field advantage. Most of the country is a standard 2 points for me, but there are some teams that do deviate on the high end or on the low end. And again, it's just a way of trying to, ascertain what home field advantage is worth. And also it's part of the process of putting together your own numbers on a weekly basis. And look, again, if nothing else, I think it's a really interesting article for people to consume because it is something you want to think about in that home field advantage just isn't going to be the same across college football that you could argue it is across most of the NFL.
Totally with you on that. We just, you need to show out at, at your alma mater to try to help boost that home field.
I know, right? I gotta donate more to the NIL collective. Well, look, I'll say this because we're coming up on the break here for the first segment. You do have to be a VSiN Pro subscriber to get the college football betting guide. And I want to make this very, very clear. You are not just getting the college football betting guide. Our NFL guide has been out for about a month. We will be doing a refreshed NFL guide after the preseason games are over, taking another look at the upcoming NFL season. But we'll have an NBA betting guide coming out very soon. NHL betting primer as well. We'll have all of our weekly football content, best bets across the board, all of our NBA, NHL content, all that kind of thing. So if you do lock in for, an annual subscription or our football special that's out there, you get way more than just this guide. Now is an excellent time to become a VSiN Pro subscriber to take advantage of all of that.
I love what you had to say there, Adam.
I probably took your thunder. I think that was your plan at the end of the segment.
I wanted you to do it. You're the one. This is the guy, the godfather of the guides, both the NFL and the college football betting guide. So what we've done, we've laid out the general, what to expect. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes. We'll have Jonathan Von Tobel coming up next talking about a couple of the conferences he broke down when we return, breaking down the VSiN college football betting guide.
This is VSiN's College Football Betting Guide Release Special. Here's Ben Wilson and Adam Burke.
Our 2024 VSiN College Football Betting Guide is your ultimate resource for the upcoming college football season, including previews of all 134 teams, a preseason top 25, power ratings, proven betting systems, and more. Sign up today and you receive both the college football and NFL betting guides, plus full VSiN Pro access to our daily Pro Picks 24/7 video, exclusive data like our betting splits. See all of our subscription options at VSiN.com/subscribe and pick the plan that works best for you. That is VSIN.com/subscribe. Back with VSiN senior editor Adam Burke. I'm Ben Wilson. This is the College Football Betting Guide Release Special. I got your title right, finally, Adam.
You didn't. Managing editor. You're
close.
Get it right. Zachary, we consider Zachary Cohen our senior editor. He will be coming up later in the show.
It doesn't make any sense. You're older. Senior should be on your name.
But I'm managing.
I want to be the assistant too, Adams.
I think my official title is just JVT's boss at this point.
That's a good title. I think we can roll with it. Jonathan Von Tobel, part of the betting guide as well. I think that has a nice ring to it. JVT's boss, co-host of VSiN Primetime with Tim Murray. You see him on the air 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Fridays. As we go to our progressive guest line, our first of two guests, Zach Cohen will come up in a little bit. Right now, though, it is Jonathan Von Tobel. He broke down the Big 12 and the Mountain West for us, and you got a couple really interesting conferences this year, JVT, because Big 12, I would argue, of the quote-unquote Power Four is the most wide open of any this year, and a really fascinating conference to do the deep dive into.
Yeah, I mean, I think both are pretty deep, right? When you talk about teams that can win these respective conferences, Mountain West is not as deep as the Big 12, but when you look at the odds for the Big 12, I think you can make a very realistic case for a team as deep as TCU that's floating around the range at 17-1. So this conference is going to be fascinating, and it's funny when I was writing up the Big 12 and you had this common thread, and at one point I think when I get to a team, I kind of mentioned it's like, look, every single one of these teams has a very similar trait. Offense looks like it's going to be great. Defense is probably going to be below average. And you're going to get a lot of, I think, variance when you have teams that are built like that.
Well, and let's talk about that variance there because, you got some newcomers here to the Big 12. You've got some teams that were playing in what was a overall stronger Pac-12 last year than I think what we see out of the Big 12, especially with Oklahoma and Texas gone. Do you feel like one of the newcomers, whether it's Arizona, Utah, Arizona State, Colorado, do you feel like one of the newcomers has a really, really good shot this year in that conference?
Yeah, I think if we're focusing on that, right, it's the two that we know. It's Utah and it's Arizona. Utah, obviously, bringing back Cam Rising. For those who don't remember what Cam Rising was back in 2022, he was a fantastic quarterback. So you're getting one of the better quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in this entire league back, essentially. So while he doesn't count for a returning starter, Adam, he is an awesome addition for this squad. We know over 3,000 total yards, both passing and rushing, over 30 touchdowns in that year. So he's going to be absolutely fantastic. And then you look at Arizona. I've said this to Tim Murray on VSiN primetime before, as somebody who watches a lot of Mountain West football. I'm not all in on Brent Brennan as a head coach, as I think some are. I think he deserves some credit for what he did with San Jose State. But from a game management standpoint, I don't think he's there. Having said that, his roster's loaded. Pretty much everyone sticks around. Not that many people went with Jed Fish, including Noah Fafita. So you've got one of the better quarterbacks in the Mountain West, Freudian slip, in the Big 12, as well as a defense that was extremely strong up front last season. 3.6 yards per carry, 118 yards allowed on the ground per game. I think that those two are the two that you're looking at, and I wouldn't say no to Arizona if you believed in them, because I do think that roster's awesome.
Utah, Kansas State, those are the two top favorites, each sub 4-1 to win the league. But looking at our college football, the betting guide that came out, JVT, our experts, we had 5 different winners across all of us who honed in on different teams. It speaks to the variance we expect. Outside of that first two, there's a bunch of teams in the 7, 8-1, all the way down to 12, 13-1 range that are really enticing. Who are a couple that you ended up landing on that you certainly feel could make some more noise than those odds indicate?
So I think one, for me, it's Iowa State, right? I think when you look at what Iowa State brings back, quarterback, very important. Rocco Becht, one of the better quarterbacks in the Big 12 last year, redshirt sophomore this year. But you look at it, 5th best graded passer by PFF standards in the Big 12. He was tied for 3rd in turnover-worthy play rate. That's lowest at 2.6%. He's only going to get better. He's got his entire offensive line back. Jaden Higgs, 53 receptions, 983 yards, is back. All Big 12 team. Jalen Noel led the team in touchdowns, receptions. He's back. Abu Sama, there's so much loaded talent here, skill position-wise, Ben. And then you look at the defense. They're a great defensive team, and they get 9 starters back, 3.8 yards per carry, 136 yards per game rushing on the ground, 46th against the run by EPA standards, 26th on early downs in the country. I think Iowa State has everything in front of them if they want to be good, and they have a chance to make noise on a national sense as well. Look, you get the Cy-Hawk Trophy, whatever that thing is, on September 7th against Iowa. You avoid the big boys until late in the season. We're talking about Utah and Kansas State. I would not be shocked if Iowa State rolls into that November 23rd matchup with one loss against Utah. I think the world of the Cyclones. And I'll give you one quick dark horse. I don't think they're going to win the Big 12, but a candidate to go over their win total. I like what Scott Satterfield has at Cincinnati. I think when you have an offensive line that is as good as they have, you have a 1,000-yard rusher coming back. You do have a quarterback competition, but when you are set in the trenches like that and you bring back a defense that, yes, wasn't very good, but at least you bring a lot back, I think this offense is going to surprise some teams. And the Bearcats' schedule, very, very manageable. I think they can be a team that goes bowling. So over 5, I think, is a playable number for a win total for the Bearcats.
John, we've had a lot of glasses half full here. Let's take one that's half empty. Is there a team after breaking down the Big 12 that you're looking to fade here, whether it's on a weekly basis or from a win total standpoint?
Yeah, I think there's a couple. I mean, I'll say this. I don't think I'm looking to fade them, but I will just say that I do think Kansas State, I would caution anybody that wants to jump all the way in, because you are still talking about a sophomore taking over and you don't know what that's going to look like. And there's a lot of expectations on this team. And from a power rating standpoint, it's going to lead to some pretty high numbers, right, Adam? So I think that from that standpoint, Kansas State is going to be one that I would look to play against. But I think in the big picture, if we're talking about win totals, let's go to their in-state rival, Kansas, because the Jayhawks have a lot going on, right? They are not playing in their home stadium. They're moving venues multiple times. But I think for me, what gets me is, can we rely on Jalen Daniels to be healthy? He has played in just 12 games over the last 2 seasons. And unlike the last 2 seasons, you do not have a savvy veteran behind you in Jason Bean. He is gone. Now behind him is a former walk-on and, of course, a true freshman. So this is a really thin quarterback depth chart. And when you look at Kansas and the schedule that they have, on top of the fact that I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're going to expect Jalen Daniels to miss some time, because history would tell us this. UNLV in a rematch in their bowl season is going to be a pretty tough matchup, although you get them in that at home, on the road against West Virginia, Iowa State, Kansas State, all on the schedule. And I even think Baylor might be okay. So that road game, we'll see if Dave Aranda's still there. But the Kansas for sure is at the top of a team that at least under on the win total is somewhere I would go.
8 is that win total. Iowa State, that very well may be more Cyclone fans in the building at Arrowhead come late in the year than Jayhawk fans, as Jonathan Von Tobel joins us right now on our College Football Guide special release show. Follow him at MeJVT. He also broke down the Mountain West. It's great to have you on talking Mountain West, because You are the only one who did not pick Boise State to win this conference. They are heavy, heavy favorites to go out ahead and win. First, make the anti-Boise case, and then go into who you actually like to potentially upset the Broncos this year.
Look, so I wrote about this in the guide, and on the surface, when I tell you, hey, you've got about 18 guys coming back, the entire starting 11 essentially coming back for your defense, you're going to think, well, that's a pretty good deal. But then when you kind of dive into the numbers for Boise State defensively, 6.1 yards per play allowed last year, 71st in opponent EPA per play, 82nd in opponent expected points added on early downs, 25.8 points per game they allowed was the second most allowed in the last 7 years. And so I think there's a reality in which you're kind of watching this team and you're like, oh, like they're kind of average on defense. I mean, they were average to below average in multiple categories last year. So while I understand the continuity and maybe you get a little bit better, there's more of a reality where you're just exactly the same team you were last season. And then when you talk about, Ben, the numbers that are out there, odds on favorites to win the conference, heavily shaded to the over 9 wins, I think the expectations are too high. And you too have some questions at quarterback. At least you have not decided who it's going to be. So for me, my money falls on 2 teams. The first of which is UNLV. UNLV brings back quite a bit of talent at the skill positions from last year. They are replacing their entire quarterback room. Malik Williams comes from Campbell. Matt Sluka comes in from Holy Cross. But they are 2 better fits for that go-go offense that Brennan Marion likes to run. You got Ricky White. You've got Jackson Woodard back in the middle of that defense. And you recruited a lot of size on that back end. Guys coming in from Arkansas and other Power 5 conferences that are going to help you out in the secondary. And I think when you look at it from an odds standpoint, the Rebels could be very dangerous in the Mountain West. And the last one is I put a bet on Wyoming at 14-1. I know that Craig Bull is gone. Jay Zavell comes in, though. He gets a really good chunk of his defense back. And at the skill positions, you got so much coming back. You got 4 guys along the offensive line, your top 3 rushers. I think that Wyoming, and especially when you get like games like Boise State at home, are going to be a little bit of a pain in the butt. So from a value standpoint, UNLV and Wyoming are the 2 teams for me that I focused on in the Mountain West to win the conference.
Jonathan Von Tobel with us on our college football betting guide show. Here, follow him at MeJVT. Real quick before I let you go, you also dabbled in the Heisman market. You took a couple of ginormous shots here, JVT, on long shot. Tell us about one of them here. You've got it 500-1.
Yeah, Dylan Raiola. I mean, we saw him rock the Patrick Mahomes look. He's working out with them, but really it's just Nebraska men, as we've all probably talked about ad nauseum, their schedule's really manageable, and they could go into that matchup with Ohio State undefeated, 1 loss. But this is a team that I think could surprise from people from a record standpoint. The front seven's awesome. And flatly, I'll take the starting quarterback of a storied program that could end up with 10 wins. And I think that he has a very high ceiling in terms of what he could be. At 500-1, I thought that was worth a sprinkle. So, yes, one of the 2 very long shots I had in the Heisman race.
There we go. Jonathan Von Tobel with us here on our Progressive Guest Line. Thank you for your contributions. As always, JVT, great breakdowns as well on those individual bets and conferences.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Will the sunglasses be enough for Dylan? I mean, it was a spitting image of Patrick Mahomes.
And also JVT writing about the Pac-2 because they're playing a Mountain West Conference schedule this year.
Do not forget about the Pac-2.
Yes.
Most people do, but you can't forget it about it. We'll go to another one of our contributors up next. He's Zach Cody, broke down the SEC for us as well as the Heisman race. We'll discuss it after this here on the College Football Betting Guide Show.
This is VSiN's College Football Betting Guide Release Special. Here's Ben Wilson and Adam Burke.
We roll on the VSiN College Football Betting Guide Show from downtown Las Vegas, our Circus Sportsbook studio, back with managing editor of the guide. I finally got it right, Adam.
You got it right.
3 tries. There we go.
There you go.
Big reason why I got that right.
Let me Venmo you.
Oh,
Make
sweet.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll take.
Make sure I get it right.
Tree fitty, please, from you on that, Adam.
Like $3.50 or $350?
No, tree fitty is fine. That's $350.
$3.99?
Well, no, I'm not looking for a VSiN Pro deal. I mean, because I'm an employee, so I get that. But
that's true.
We have a lot of good deals, at least on VSiN Pro. I don't know. I finally got it right. I'm happy with myself. After Jonathan Von Tobel joins us, JVT was great. Gave me a lot of confidence. As him and I we're aligned on some Big 12 thoughts. I'm not sure where we're going to line, though, on some SEC teams, because that's a really fascinating conference this year. Zach Cohen, he had the very tall task. That is, of always, any sort of guide, you got to be locked in on the SEC. Zach Cohen joins us right now, VSiN's senior editor, who not only broke down the SEC, but also the top options for Heisman this year. And SEC, it's not only deep, best conference in college football, Zach, but you add in some of the new teams as well, with Texas, Oklahoma, and Texas expected to compete right away as that second betting favorite to Georgia. As you kind of did your power ratings and looked at the scale of this conference here from that 10,000-foot view, where do you see the rest of the league relative to Georgia, who has been the class of this conference now for several years?
Honestly, like I do look at the Georgia roster kind of the way that everybody else does. I think it's probably the best roster at all of college football. But at the same time, I just think that schedule is going to be really tough. I think that we're going to end up seeing that game at Alabama deciding who wins this conference, because I'm a lot higher on Alabama than a lot of other people are. And at the same time, when I was doing this conference, I know that the SEC is loaded every year, but I really think that there are 5 or 6 teams that are going to flirt with 10 wins this season. I think it's going to be a really, really good, really strong conference this year.
Zach, a lot of realignment around college football, but I think it's maybe the most interesting scenario here with Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC, because now you're just simply going to face better talent on defense than what you faced in the Big 12 over the last several seasons. So are you as high on the Texas Longhorns as the market seems to be, or do you think that maybe this step up in class will hurt them a little bit?
I think it's going to hurt them. I think especially when you look at their schedule, they play a lot of tough road games, including, a road game at Michigan early in the season, which I think a lot of people are expecting them to win, but that's going to depend on what we're going to see from the Michigan offense. But I just think that there's some really tough games on this schedule. One that I think is going to be a lot tougher than other people think is that road game at Texas A&M to end the year. I'm really high on Texas A&M this season. I played the over 8.5 on them. I also kind of like the alternate over on them. They were one of the teams I was talking about when I said I think the 10 wins is in play, even though I think a lot of people would probably be excluding them when talking about the top of the SEC.
Zach Cohen with us right now here, VSiN's senior editor, talking SEC.
I want to follow up on the Texas A&M thing, because is it a Mike Elko thing? Is it new offensive coordinator Colin Klein? Or do you just feel like maybe this talent now is finally going to shine through?
It's a little bit of all of it. I think that Jimbo did a really good job of recruiting to Texas A&M. He's always been a great recruiter. I just don't think you could trust him on a game day experience. I think that that's going to be where Elko comes in and shines. He won with a program last year, in a Duke team that I thought was dead before he got there. I think that now he turned that into a winning program. Maybe not now that he's left, but he's going to come to Texas A&M. He's had success here as a defensive coordinator. I think that Klein's going to help Connor Wegman in that offense a lot. That Kansas State team was really good in the red zone, really good on third downs. They're a team that you could always kind of trust to convert in big situations. So I think if he kind of gets the most out of Wegman, this is going to be a really good team, because I think Elko coaching up that defense, which is full of 5-star talent, there's a lot of potential there. And I think that they have a tough schedule when you look at the opponents, but most of those games are going to be played in College Station.
He is Zach Cohen. Follow him at Betting on X. As far as who your selection was, we had, of our panel of 15, 3 different choices, mostly split between Georgia and Alabama here. Make the case here for the Tide. Year number 1 of Kalen DeBoer, who are sitting there a little bit further down the odds board than most people are accustomed to Alabama being in college football.
Yeah, obviously huge shoes to fill. Nick Saban's the greatest coach of all time, but I do think that DeBoer, probably a top 3 coach in college football right now, a guy that is unbelievable offensively. So I think you're going to get Jalen Milroe in there, one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the country. That Tide offense is going to explode, in my opinion. I think that the receivers, a lot of people are worried about that group, but it's another one where, they've just recruited 5-star talent. These guys are going to be capable of stepping up and making plays, especially with a coach that has gotten a lot out of receivers. We saw what happened with the Washington ones last year. And I also think the defense returns quite a bit of talent. It's another group that lost a little bit, but half the starters are returning. They brought in some transfers, have some younger players coming up and ready to go. I think Kane Womack is a really good defensive coach. I thought he did a really good job at South Alabama. Now is going to be an elite defensive coordinator in the SEC. So I just think that people are kind of overrating the loss of Saban a little bit. It's hard to do that, but when you bring in a coach as good as DeBoer and you have a team this talented, I think you can make up for it.
Zach, I'll do the same thing I did with JVT. We've been talking a lot of positives about teams, some glowing reviews, stuff like that. What about the negative? Who are some teams in the SEC that you're looking to go against this year, whether it's from a win total standpoint or maybe looking to fade on a week-by-week standpoint?
I think the big one that I'm lower on than most is Missouri. I think that offense is going to be awesome. They have most of the guys returning from last year. I just think that the problem is you lose one of the best defensive coordinators in the country to LSU. You lose a lot of your defensive talent. Then you have to go and play SEC teams that I think are really good offensively. I just think that their defense is going to lose them a lot of games. I mean, not a lot, but less than. I don't see them winning 10. I think that we're probably looking at an 8 or 9 win team. Another one that I'm a little bit, I would want to say lower on than most. I think most people think that Florida schedule is a nightmare, but I would go under 4.5 on Florida, a team that I think has improved just in terms of what you're looking at compared to last season, but just has a gauntlet of a schedule. And that's another team that you asked who I'd be looking to fade. I think in the second half of that season, when Billy Napier's seat gets a little bit hotter from the games that they lose early in the year, they're going to start to lose against the spread quite a bit.
No love for my alma mater, Missouri, from Zach. It's a good thing because whenever Mizzou has high expectations, they fail. I say this just as a disgruntled alum. So thank you for pouring cold water on the hype. Big part of that, Mizzou, easiest strength of schedule for all Power 5.
At least your alma mater has expectations. I went to Akron. We never have any.
There were a couple good
Wisconsin's similar. When Wisconsin has expectations, we stink too.
Yeah, well, once basketball season comes around, Akron's had a couple good years.
That's true.
So.
Good soccer program.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. National champs in soccer.
Yeah, that was around the time I was there, so that was a long time ago.
Oh, Adam Burke. We've learned something new today. Zach, as far as the Heisman market goes, you did a really good job breaking down everything, whether it is from the top of the odds board as well as some of the mid-tier shots, and then long shots as well. The big thing we've seen over the last 4 to 6 weeks has been a huge rise in bets and money on Dylan Gabriel to win the Heisman. He actually overtook all the guys at the top there, that cluster in the 9-10-1 range, and we're seeing Gabriel 8-1. A lot of shops, either the co-favorite or the actual favorite. What do you make of that move on the odds board for the new Oregon quarterback this year?
It makes a lot of sense to me. I prefer to take longer shots in this market. I just think it's a little more fun. I think that this year, especially with so many good teams, there is value down the board. But if I had to pick one of those chalkier options, I do think it's Gabriel. I just think that moving to Oregon, where the offensive line is so good, the wide receiver group, I believe, is the best in the country, and the offensive coordinator has proven himself to be one of the best in the country as well. I just think an older quarterback like that has been there before, has kind of, played at a high level everywhere he's been, dating back to when he was a freshman at UCF. I just really like what he's going to be able to do in that offense. I think he's been able to put up huge numbers. I think Oregon's going to be a college football playoff team, and I think that that's kind of a recipe for a Heisman winning season. So I think that if I had to take one of those guys at the top, I would go with Gabriel. I think 8-1 is still a pretty good number.
Next, staying in the Big Ten here, another newcomer to the Big Ten coming over from the Pac-12, USC. You're interested in either quarterback, regardless of who gets the start in Lincoln Riley's offense.
Yeah, I did this last year with the Alabama quarterbacks. It wasn't really clear who was going to be the starter. I do think it's going to be Miller Moss, but if it is Maeva, I think he's going to have a chance as well. I just think that we could trust Lincoln Riley to build an elite offense no matter who is under center. And we saw Miller Moss play really well in their bowl game last year. So he has familiarity in the system. I think the offense is going to be explosive. But I think what's really going to help USC is the expectations are somewhat low. I think they're going to be better than people think. I think that defense with Danton Lynn coming in, the defensive coordinator from UCLA, I think he's going to fix things pretty quickly. It's a talented group that just needs somebody to come in and put them in the right spots. I think that Lynn could do that. And if he does, I don't really see any reason USC can't win 9 or so games. And if you have a QB putting up massive numbers on a 9-win team in a Big Ten conference, I just think they're going to be in the mix there.
As far as best value plays, Zach, you're going to Tennessee, a guy who was awesome in the bowl game against Iowa last year, Nico Iamaleava. What makes you like the Tennessee signal caller so much here heading into 2024?
I just think if you're looking for a player that's going to be most like a Jaden Daniels last year, just an electric player that puts up huge numbers on an above-average team, I think it's going to be Nico. I just think that 9 wins, when you look at their schedule, seems really doable. And if they do somehow get that 10th win, it'll probably be because he played really well in a really tough game. I think he's, a 6'6" dual threat quarterback. They've said that he's the best quarterback they've had since Hendon Hooker, who put up massive numbers in Josh Heupel's offense. We saw Nico put up big numbers against an Iowa defense last year that was top 10 in the country, 4 total touchdowns and a blowout win in the bowl game. I just think you're going to see a full season of stuff like that. So I think if you're looking for a QB to put up massive numbers on a good team, it's going to be him. I just think that there's a really good shot that that number ends up looking really good at the end of the year.
Sitting there around 18-1, a lot of shots.
Ben, too. I will say this. The last 6 quarterbacks to win the Heisman, at least 40 touchdown passes. And you need an offense where it's go, which Tennessee has.
No doubt. Zach, always great having your insights. Great work as well on the guide. SEC, Heisman breakdowns. Really appreciate it as always, man. Be well.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Zach.
Great job by Zach, as always. Senior editor, not managing it. Adam still runs that part. Senior editor, Zach Cohen. When we come back, final segment for us on the College Football Betting Guide release special. We'll go through all, at least some of, if not all, of our best bets on this 2024 season.
This is VSiN's College Football Betting Guide release special. Here's Ben Wilson and Adam Burke.
Power ratings, picks, previews, predictions. Pro, as in becoming a VSiN Pro subscriber and getting an all-access pass to our betting tools, betting splits, and the 2024 College Football Betting Guide. The College Football Guide and our previously released NFL Betting Guide will have you ready to turn a profit on the gridiron this year. The only way to get the guides and everything we have to offer is to become a VSiN Pro subscriber, and you can do exactly that at VSiN.com/subscribe. A huge thanks to our two guests on the College Football Betting Guide release show today. Jonathan Von Tobel, great stuff. Breaking down the Big 12 and Mountain West. Check out his contributions in the guide as well on the Pac-2. And then Zach Cohen, just awesome stuff breaking down the SEC and the Heisman Trophy markets. Adam, you've gotten a lot of help from those two here over the last few weeks.
I have gotten a lot of help. Major shout out to Zachary Cohen, who's my senior editor over at VSiN.com, and also Matt Devine, who put this guide together. He does a great job designing all of our guides. This is not a small task to put this thing together. Again, it is over 200 pages, so it takes a lot of hands, takes a lot of people involved. We have over 50 best bets in this guide from VSiN hosts and contributors as well, not to mention all of the written content, which a lot of our hosts contributed to. So, all hands on deck approach to be sure, but, very proud of how this guide came out. Very excited for everyone to get their hands on it.
Even I helped. I mean, that's saying a lot.
Even you helped.
Even when I'm being asked, that means that truly means all hands on deck. We'll get to one of my best bets that is in the guide here in a little bit. Adam, you have a few of them. We can talk too about some of the. There are some very popular best bets that multiple people have. I did not include UCLA under, but I mean, I'm not the only one. There are multiple people in the guide who made that case. I think the issue for our publication purposes was, Adam, we were putting those picks in after the line had moved so drastically. That thing went from 6 to 5.5. I thought at 5.5 still playable. Now it's 5. Some books even down to 4.5 on UCLA. But we laid out a lot of different reasons in the guide: schedule, lack of returning productivity. Then you add on a coach in Sean Foster who's never done that, had never been there before. It wasn't even really as much about the awful press conference at Big Ten Media Days. Like, it should have already been baked in if you were following along to UCLA that it would be a really, really tough first year in the Big Ten for the Bruins.
Yeah, I mean, the initial press conference at Big Ten Media Days certainly didn't help. But credit to him. I mean, he wore a shirt to one of the first days of practice that says, we're in LA or whatever. So credit to him
for lean in on it.
For kind of leaning in on it. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's all you can do at this point in time. I mean, look, UCLA also loses a lot, right? I mean, they lose the offensive genius that is Chip Kelly. They lost some returning production as well. And also, I mean, they have a brutal schedule, travel schedule, brutal schedule in general with what they have to deal with here in their first year in the Big Ten. Not to mention, they got to play at LSU, which is a very, very difficult non-conference game for them. And truth be told, I mean, we'll see what Fresno State is like with Jeff Tedford having to step down. Tim Skipper, one of the 30 new head coaches in college football here for this season that I wrote about in the guide. But that game against Fresno State is hardly a gimme late in the year after playing Washington and USC. So just a brutal schedule for the Bruins. And look, I mean, those are things, I know it kind of goes without saying, but I'm going to go ahead and say it here. Those are things you really want to look at from a win total standpoint. Looking at the schedule, the travel, the timing of the bye weeks, all those kinds of things are critically important.
We'll stick on the topic of teams we're looking to fade. You hear so often, Adam, in breakdowns and previews of teams, it is all positive. Everybody, they're in the best shape of their life. We love our recruits coming in. We were awesome in the portal. Well, not everybody can have success. And while there is a lot that we are betting on as far as futures, teams that we are high on, it's always good, to focus on the teams that will be on the other side of that coin. SEC is a great example. You can have teams that are really, really good and go 5-7, 6-6 because the talent, the schedule is just that tough. One team you look to isolate on, Adam, is the South Carolina Gamecocks this year. What's the thought behind a Gamecock team that is right in the middle of that loaded SEC this year?
Yeah, so, as we've talked about, I put together a power ratings model. I put together my home field advantage calculations. And then I have a spreadsheet I go through. Thanks to my good buddy Rich Lamons for helping me set that up. Spreadsheet that I go through, I put in the schedule, and I have a projected win total for all 134 teams. Admittedly, I do have South Carolina at 5.78 wins, which would be over their win total line of 5.5. But keep in mind, I mean, a projected win total, they technically have a chance to win just about every game, but it may be a very, very small chance. Now, while those small chances add up, they have a brutal schedule in the SEC on an annual basis. Outside of the game against Vanderbilt, they're 5.5-point dog to Kentucky for me. That's their smallest dog roll in SEC play. They'll beat Wofford. They'll win some of their non-conference games, stuff like that. But they have a first-year quarterback in Lenora Sellers, who I think is going to be a good player in due time. Shane Beamer is a really, really good head coach on the offensive side. I think Spencer Rattler showed a lot of growth at South Carolina. Sellers probably will as well. But this is a team that is just very undermanned when you talk about the kind of schedule that they have to play. Also, something else you want to think about from a win total standpoint, Sellers is a legitimate dual threat guy. He was not a very accurate passer in high school, but he's a very effective runner. He's a big dude, like 6'5", 230. But that still takes a toll if you're going to be running around taking a bunch of shots in your first year as a starter. So for South Carolina, even if he improves throughout the course of the season, health is a major question mark. There's no depth at the position at all. I think South Carolina goes under 5.5 wins.
Yeah, even if you have to lay a little bit of juice, these are the markets where juice is worth laying in a lot of cases. Yeah. You've seen how at this point, too, now that we flipped the counter to August, smart money has really shaped these markets, and even getting something sub minus 150 can, in a lot of ways, still be a bargain for your win totals that you're making. One that I bet I won't belabor too much the point because Jonathan Von Tobel made a very good case. Actually, me and JVT, the only two people on our panel who selected Iowa State to win the Big 12. But I love the Cyclones coming into this year. 7.5 over juice, even at minus 120, is a totally reasonable premium to pay on a team that by a lot of metrics has the most returning production in all of college football, had the second best defense in the Big 12 behind only Texas, who's now in the SEC, and Rocco Becht, back at quarterback, who had tremendous growth in the second half of the year, passed for over 400 yards in the bowl game for Iowa State. If you look just at production in general, too, Adam, obviously schedules have a big role as how a team is going to fare from one year to the next, but simply just on returning production, last year's top 4 most production returning teams averaged over 3 wins higher than the previous season. Teams that were bottom 4 last year, they lost over 3 games per year on average. Now, does that mean I think Iowa State's going to go from 7-5 to winning 10 games easily? No, but the schedule's there for them to be a one-loss team going into mid-November, and it's a 10-1 long shot that is very palatable as well. If you're looking to throw a little sprinkle on a wide-open conference, Iowa State, to me, I'm in complete agreement with JVT that is the team to back there in that league.
Yeah, and as somebody who wrote up the conference previews for the AAC, the American Athletic Conference, and the Sun Belt, a lot of teams don't play defense in those two leagues, right? They are all good on offense, but it's the teams that play defense that do really well. The Appalachian States of the world, South Alabama the last couple of years, although I think they're going to drop off significantly with Kane Womack, their head coach, now the DC at Alabama. But in these conferences where teams don't really play defense, if you're capable of playing defense, you can stand out. And that's something that has happened with Iowa State and has happened with Matt Campbell throughout his tenure there. So not one that I'm on, at least as of yet, but I do agree with where you guys are coming from.
As far as the Sun Belt, you did write them up. It's a conference that, maybe not as wide open, say, as the Big 12, but our panel was very, very split between the favorite in this league, which is Appalachian State, a little bit under 3-1 to win that conference. A team that's getting a lot of hype. Well, I like Texas State about 4-1, and then James Madison, who's had tons of success from being promoted from an FCS school and now into the FBS here, going into the Sun Belt as the third favorite on the odds board. You know the conference super well, Adam. I know going back to previous years, you're betting it week in, week out. Where did you land on this very fun Sun Belt this year?
Yeah, I mean, you could call it boring, I guess. I like the favorite Appalachian State, a team that plays defense in this conference where defense, again, is at a premium. Texas State will not play a whole lot of defense this year, I don't think. They are very, very exciting offensively, and this will be G.J. Kinney's last year in San Marcos. Some bigger program is absolutely going to take him for next year. But that's the thing. Texas State is kind of all gas and no brakes, whereas I think Appalachian State last year, the defense actually finished outside the top 50 in yards per play for the first time as an FBS member, and they joined FBS in 2014. So I think they get back to their usual type of performance this season. And Joey Aguilar, top 5 passer in program history already after just one season. I think this offense is much more balanced than it has been in years past, where they've kind of had a game manager and relied on the run. Well, now I think they have a dynamic passer and can still rely on the run. So I like App State here. By the way, little trivia nugget, highest elevation east of the Mississippi is Boone, North Carolina.
There we go.
In terms of FBS programs. So, it's a tough place to go and play. It's a very, very engaged fan base, a well-coached football team. And the thing about them is, because of some of their success, because of some of their notoriety, they don't have to scratch and claw to keep everybody like a lot of the other Sun Belt programs do in this transfer portal NIL era. So there is a lot of returning production and continuity this year for the Mountaineers.
Toward the bottom of that conference, again, you know this league so well. It's deeper than a lot of people would assume for being a non-Power 4, but Louisiana Monroe, they're the last team on the odds board there. Second fewest returning production of any team in FBS, I believe, in your bottom 10 power ratings overall, Adam. I've seen some books hang them at like a half conference win total. I've been very tempted to go under on UL Monroe because it's actually a pretty deep conference, and then you have a team like the Warhawks that is a long way from competing.
I will say this, on a game-by-game basis, I like the Warhawks over their totals because Bryant Vincent comes in as the head coach, and he did wonders with New Mexico's offense last year. I think the Warhawk offense at Louisiana Monroe gets a lot better. Man, the defense needs a lot of work.
There we go. UL Monroe overs. You're not going to get that on many other.
No, definitely not. It's a good way to end it.
That's all I'm going to say. Adam, always a blast, man. We made it through another one of these release shows. College Football Betting Guide. It is now out. Have to be a VSiN Pro subscriber. You get both the college football and the NFL betting guides. There's a lot to dive into, over 200 pages. We appreciate all of our contributions from this year's College Football Betting Guide.
Don't bet college football this season without VSiN's